Welcome, everybody, to the Revenue Cycle of Truth podcast. My name is Josh Vierling, and I'll be your host today. Our goal on this podcast, as always, is to share engaging revenue cycle insights and content from some of the leading experts. So today, I'm super excited because I'm joined with Sergio Quiej. And Sergio is a revenue cycle consultant who has worked with some major health systems. He's an expert in cash flow. So what we're going to talk about that's just so exciting right now is generating cash flow during COVID. So Sergio, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Josh, I'm glad to be part of it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's start. I know there's a lot of different topics that we can touch as it relates to cash flow, but let's start at a high level first and just get your perspective on some things we can do to accelerate cash flow. I know there's different components, there's different processes, but maybe we start from a high level and then we'll get more granular as we go. So maybe just start us out from a real high level and give us some of your perspectives and strategies.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, with COVID-19 and all the challenges that we're facing, it's very crucial to quickly identify and go back to our teams and start pinpointing who are those patients that we missed out by seeing us, who do we reschedule, who's not going to come back to see us, and what other opportunities are available to the medical practice, like zero balance payments that before were considered within thresholds of our write-offs. Also, focus on patient outreach and being repetitive in your processes, and that means tighten that up with your teams and provide convenience of our service. Revisit those kind of things that we're doing right now.
Excellent. Okay. One thing you said that was really interesting to me that I want to dive into is it was very interesting because you were talking about reaching back out to those patients. So
Right.
That's really interesting. So let's talk about that. Obviously there's a correlation to cash flow there, but what are some of the strategies on that? Because I could see that being huge right now, right? You got to get people back into the hospital, right, to start generating cash flow. So what are some insights you can shed there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as soon as everyone started identifying that we needed to close down all of our visits, for the most part, we're generating visits with our patients 6 weeks out, depending on how large that group is. And if you're doing outpatient procedures, all of that was canceled, right? So we need to go and identify quickly who those patients were, if there were new patients, if there were follow-up patients, or if there were chronic patients. We want to make sure that we identify those team members in your clinic, deploy them to different areas, because now they're not going to be interacting with patients. No one's coming in, and you can keep them in your staff. And this will be more of an investment in your clinic, because you can have them reach out to those patients. If there were new patients, you want to make sure you reschedule them. And as things progress and they change, you also want to continue that communication, because those are patients that they seek you out for whatever reason, whether a referral or not, and you don't want to lose those patients. And also, those patients that were coming for specific reasons, make sure that you identify with your other group physicians and NPs and PAs if they're willing to do telemedicine. Right now, that is one of the key components in keeping your practice alive and creating that cash flow, because you want to touch base with your patients, make sure you do that follow-up visit, and also identify the patients that are chronically ill, depending on what the specialty is. And that's going to be crucial how fast you reach out to them, because remember, we need to, chronic patients, if they're exposed to COVID, they're going to be likely in the high end to be a positive patient if they become exposed to someone who is, right? So they have more underlying issues. So reach out to those patients, see if you can collaborate with another physician in your area that you both could call in on that telemedicine phone call, right? Where you can interact with them and and create a trust cross, and you'll be able to help bridge with the other physician that conversation, right? So it's much easier now because you're there. It's almost like being in the room with the specialty.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So how are maybe I missed this, but one thing I'm really curious about that you said was how are they one accessing the data, and who's doing that frontline outreach? Is that just a matter of the registration, or is it the doctors? Who's actually what are some strategies of people that are actually doing this, and what are you seeing that's successful in terms of pulling people in, especially those people that were either chronically ill or they need to be, get in there for their elective surgeries or whatever?
Right. That's a very good question, Josh. You need to you need to call in a meeting and start looking through that list of of all the patients that you were going to see 6 weeks out, and the patients that were behind maybe 60 days. The reason I say 60 days is because more likely that patient was coming up for a follow-up. So you also want to include patients that were 60 days right when COVID hit, was announcing, or whenever that happened, so that you can include them, because you don't want to leave them out, because those are the patients that are going to be coming soonest for an appointment, for a follow-up appointment. And the key to that is to bring in your teams and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is the strategy. We want to connect. Once you identify who the key people that are going to be calling your patients, it's very, very important to create templates. That way, they're not flying out of the air, right? When they're speaking to the patient, they have something to guide them along the way, of what questions, and always update that template, because we're learning as we're going, and as well as we're implementing this strategy, right? So what's working well and what's not working well in response to the patients. Did we use this template today and we were able to schedule 5 patients, and this other way of communicating the information to the patient really brought us more challenges. But either way, you're communicating to the patient, and that's bringing value to your medical clinic.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Okay, so what else? What else? I remember you mentioned zero balance reviews is another source of maybe cash flow revenue here. So any other things you wanted to touch on?
Yeah. So whenever we're talking about zero balances, there are those small discrepancies that at every facility, every provider, they do this. They have a threshold that we're not going to fight this type of a variance, if you will, because it doesn't make sense for us to go after a smaller amount. But now you may consider that as an option, because if you can have someone look after those and they can bulk all of those claims that maybe there were $5 under or $15 under that were written off, and a third party comes in and scrubs all of those claims, now you're looking at a very significant amount of cash that could potentially come in, because these were variances that they were owed to you according to your fee schedule, right? It's just a matter of having someone look at all of this and put a strategy in place, and also how you're going to get your return on that investment. It depends on how you contract with a third party vendor, right? Whether the way where they help you and you help yourself, it's you give them the bulk of business and they work in your favor, only if they collect or if they find anything, right? So there are things to look at that, but that could be a complete different topic in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've always said zero balances not only produce the revenue, but they produce all kinds of trends too. That why the accounts were written to zero, and you can kind of do a lot of root cause fixes. But you also talked about service lines. I'm curious what you were driving at there in the beginning. You were talking about service lines. What relevance did that have to cash flow?
Well, Josh, when you're looking at your book of business, you're starting to identify the different ages of your patients, right? So you can go ahead and you can bucket those patients in the age ranges that they fall into, and also look at all the diagnoses that your patients have ever come in for, and you're gonna have to look at that. And if right now everyone is been quarantined, everyone is at a high mental state right now, where they interact with a lot of people, the same people over and over again, that becomes very exhausting. And I can tell you for myself that that can lead to mental health challenges, right? So if you are a primary physician, your point is to look at after the well-being of this patient, right? So that gives you a door to look at the mental health of your patient population in your book of business for the clinic. Start looking at those things. Start setting up follow-up follow-up appointments where you're touching base on the well-being of your patients. Hey, I'm giving you a call. How are we doing? How has this caused whatever in your family? Is there anything we can talk about? So you start learning more about your patients, what it is that they're doing, how they interact with their families, and that again creates value to your clinic and loyalty in return.
Yeah, great point. That's excellent. Well, this is all very good stuff, Sergio. Very important right now because now, you got to get the patients back in the doors, do it in a safe way and a profitable way. So really appreciate you having you on the podcast, and look forward to talking to you in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you, Josh.